the education experience and the academic street cred to make an excellent career. However, as you know, that's not enough. It's going to take extra effort beyond just your academic credentials. And by that I mean you need to exhibit the behaviors, the traits, and the characteristics in the workforce that lead those in positions of some authority to conclude that you should be elevated, promoted, being given that raise, or whatever the case might be. So what I'd like to do is talk to you about things I've learned in my 35 years of experience that I think will be helpful. And I call it the top 10 ways to get ahead in the workplace. So let's get started. Number 10. Have common sense, good manners, and know right from wrong. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, that's what my mom and dad used to tell me. Well, I got to tell you, your mom and dad are right. And as simple as it sounds, having good manners and knowing the difference between right and wrong right away can establish you early on in your career. And I can also tell you that, unfortunately, about, my guess, maybe 10% of the workforce doesn't have this skill. So if you do, you're already in the top 90%. Consider this the table stakes, the price to play, if you will, without which not much else happens. Perhaps some of you read this book many years ago. I love it. It's called All I Ever Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten by an author named Robert Fulghum. And he says it plain and simple this way. It goes like this. Play fair, share everything, don't hit people, put things back where you found them, clean up your own mess, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody, and when you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands and stick together. All right. Number 9, build effective work relationships. I can't stress this one enough. Take the time to get to know your coworkers. Get to know them when you don't need them for something. Find out about each one of them, what makes them tick, your peers, your colleagues, your bosses, your supervisors, those that report to you. If you take a personal interest in each human being, you build equity. And later that equity will come into play when you do need them for something that's critically important. They'll go that extra mile to want to help you out because you took the time to get to know them. Think of it in the reverse. Do you really like working with that guy or gal in the office that's just a curmudgeon, that shows no interest in you or anybody else? It just stands out like a sore thumb. This comes through at every turn. And here's the key. It's my conclusion that when it's time for you to get ahead, it's not the boss that makes the decision to, say, promote you. It's the people around her. It's the people that talk to the boss and tell her about you. Because a good boss will often ask those in their inner circle, what do you think of so-and-so? I'm thinking of elevating this person. And you want those people around the boss to say favorable things, and that's how you'll get ahead. And the way they'll say favorable things is to build effective work relationships. Number 8, say what you mean and mean what you say. People really want to know where you stand. Don't just say what's safe or what you think people want to hear. It'll hurt your credibility. They'll certainly see through that. And then people will stop taking you seriously. And even if the comment that you want to make is somewhat controversial, say it professionally and be sincere. Then later, when you do offer a compliment, people will see it as genuine and authentic. Number 7, get stuff done and do it early. Be that person that's early to the meeting. Be the first one to turn in the assignment. Don't miss deadlines. Here's one, be early with your deadline. Beat it. Get a reputation as, hey, if you give it to so-and-so, she gets things done. Think of it as the Nike slogan, just do it. Number 6, raise your hand, be reliable, and be that go-to person. I can tell you from experience, many times you're in a meeting and you're at a point where it's time to delegate something after a discussion. It's time for somebody to own this project you've just been talking about. And as I looked across the table, there were 2 types of people. Those that were looking at their shoes and those that were raising their hand. Be the one that's raising their hand. I'll do that. Give it to me. Let me take a shot at it. or at least with your eyes, make connection with the person that's about to delegate the work to say, if you want me to do it, just call on me and I'm happy to do it. The one that's looking at their shoes over time, eventually time passes them by. Number 5, be positive. Don't talk about people. I think you know that. Mom and Dad told you that as well. And sometimes I know that's hard. And sometimes you'll get sucked in. There'll be others in the office that will want to engage you in that kind of dialogue or that kind of discussion. And it really leads nowhere. You want to build a reputation where somebody says, you know, I have to say this about so-and-so. She's never said a bad thing about anybody. And that becomes your brand. Now, you're human. You'll think those thoughts. You certainly want to say them. But the key is not to. And that's what separates you from the pack. By the way, my view is with each one of these, again, there's about 10% of the population that doesn't possess that skill. So we're getting down to number 4. So let's see. If you've knocked off, you're already in the top 50% of the population right now if you're with me on these first 5. So let's go to number 4. Learn to write and learn to speak. Now, we all know how to write, and we all know how to speak. We wouldn't be graduates if we didn't. But you know what I mean. It's that extra ability. When you're called on in an extemporaneous situation, and somebody says, hey, would you mind standing up and telling us your view about A, B, and C? So it's a moment of truth. Can you knock it out? Can you deliver it? Can you speak in a unprepared manner? How about in a prepared manner? Practice. It's not something that all of us are born with. It's something that can be developed. So be honest with yourself. If you're not the best in the world at it, that's okay. Just acknowledge it and say, what can I do to get better? Same with writing. Unfortunately today, you know, I don't need to tell you, we don't write as much as we used to. Our thumbs seem to do most of it. And that leads to shortcuts and sort of broken English from time to time. And when you're in the workforce, you want to stand out as that person that can put a cohesive sentence together with the right punctuation and all the right spelling and so forth. And then when you're back in your social circles, feel free to take the shortcuts that our society does today. But those in positions of responsibility will look for those that can write and speak. Number 3, be ethical. There really is no substitute for this one. Either you're ethical or you're not. And it's not a question of if, it's only when. Someone who doesn't have ethics will make the wrong call, and it will be a career-ending move. Fortunately, most of us are wired in a way where we do know the difference between right and wrong. But just to help you a little bit, here's a little test that came from an author, and she puts it this way. Well, if the choice is a tough one, and you're a little uptight, if the answer ain't easy, and you're feeling some fright, if your gut says it's wrong, well, they're probably right. Let's go to number 2. Listen, be brief and concise with answers to questions. I put this as number 2 because I spent a career using a lot of my time asking questions. And often questions are asked of me. And what I learned early on is the person that's asking the question really just wants the answer. As simple as that sounds. And how often do we find ourselves in situations where we go on and we over-elaborate? The other day, just to use an illustration, because we're all teachers at heart, I was in a meeting, we got talking about a topic, and somebody was presenting a project they're working on, and so I said, hey, that's great. By the way, when do you anticipate that project will be done? And 5 minutes later, I think I heard the word November somewhere in there. And I said to myself, gee, isn't the right way to do this and say, November, Dave, and then elaborate? And what you learn is it goes like this. Answer first, elaborate second. Teach yourself that. When the boss or somebody asks you a question, get right to the answer real fast. Stop. And then if there's need to elaborate, go ahead and elaborate, but he or she will then at least have the benefit of knowing what the answer was as they listen to your elaboration. That one's important enough that I put it down as number 2. because folks really want to be around people who can be clear and concise and answer questions concretely. So we're down to number 1. If you possess these first 9, I hear say that you now have you're in the top 10% of the workforce population, so you're doing pretty good. Number 1 to me is develop your own personal elevator speech. You know the elevator speech, right? You get in an elevator on the first floor, you push 10, and somebody says, oh, you work at DeVry, tell me about that. Or you went to school at DeVry. And what they mean is, tell me about it, but they don't really mean, tell me about it, right? Listen, I'll listen to you for the ride up the elevator, but if the door opens on 10 and you say, and then in my 3rd semester, like, oh. Well, I promise you somewhere on the job, somebody will ask you, tell me about yourself. Now, it might not be in those exact words, but you've all been to interviews, and everybody asks that question. It might be, take me through your resume, or why should we hire you, or tell me about yourself. Do you have a real good elevator speech that describes you as a person? Because again, what they're saying is, tell me about yourself, but they don't really mean, tell me about yourself. 1 minute, 2 minutes, that's good, but if it's, and then in the 3rd grade, my mother told me, look, I just want to know who you are. So as I end here, let me give you an illustration. Let's say after this wonderful ceremony, I'm going off to an interview, and the chairman of the board of USA University says, hey Dave, you're here applying for presidency? Tell me